Bob Robinson from Casco Marine is going to talk about aeration choices, trends, successes, and failures.
I took a few notes, and before I talk, I'm just going to share a few things that I heard today that I thought were interesting. And before today, I've taken a personality test twice in the last 3 weeks, and I came out as an entertainer, number one, and as a connector, number two. And so I'm going to connect and entertain you as we move along. I apologize in advance for anyone that I might offend. I want to say Sunday, so I'm from Wisconsin, I'm from central Wisconsin, the biggest county in Wisconsin, and we had June Dairy Days. And the thing that impressed me was that there were 5,000 people that made their way to this farm to just have a dairy breakfast that was really kind of crappy. It wasn't very healthy at all. But they can get 5,000 people at an event, and we can get 60 people at a Wisconsin Aquaculture meeting. We need to flip the switch there and have more people show up at our meetings in Wisconsin. David, YouTube videos, we do probably 125 of them. The thing that we do that makes them effective in my mind and keep them short, 3 to 4 minutes. And if they are a little rough, they're a little bit more believable. At least that's the research that we found out. Emma from northwestern or northern Wisconsin, she works tremendously well with the industry, from students to employees to vendors. It's an incredible place. I challenge you to go up there, not necessarily in winter. Meredith Brooks, Pacific Island video. All I'm going to say is I had goosebumps while that thing was going on. It was pretty cool. I want to apologize to you because I sat next to you on the plane. I said hi, and then I got off to my business and I fell asleep. So I promise that I'm going to get to know you much better during the next few days. Marana Gana Dam, your 3 hour talk was done in 15 minutes. Congratulations. And so I find I have a challenge in my company, and I think we as a group have a challenge to bridge the gap between the boomers and the millennials. I'm a boomer, and I don't necessarily think like a millennial, but we have to in order to make this industry grow. Gene Kim, I think he's a GMO version of Gary Jensen, and he's got a lot of stuff on his shoulders. Uh, One last piece of advice is don't build a fish farm too close to a national scenic riverway. So, having said that, I'm going to move along. So, different aeration choices from paddle wheels, aspirators, agitators, submerged pumps, blowers. I'm going to see if my video works here, and it doesn't, so that's okay. How much O2 is necessary? You know, there's different ways of thinking about this. Dr. Boyd suggests 1 pound of feed requires a pound of oxygen per day, keeping in mind that fish can consume up to 13 times the amount of oxygen when their stomachs are full. Average consumption method is somewhere between 0.02 to 0.05 pounds of oxygen per hour per 100 pounds of fish. That depends on the size of the fish, and it depends on the species and the water temperature that they're in. So oxygen demand in typical fish ponds is anywhere from 50% for plankton, 30% for sediment, and 20% for fish. And what we typically get as an aeration company is, I have so many pounds of fish, what do I need for aeration? And it's like, that's the least amount of the oxygen demand, and you can't tell these people to go out and do a BOD of their ponds because they're going to look at you sideways. You know, yes, research facilities can do that, but an average farmer doesn't have the ability to give a biological oxygen demand for his pond. Pond aeration are two strategies: feed the game, aerate to get the fish to harvest faster. In other words, instead of taking 18 months to get a channel catfish to harvest, feed them faster or feed them more and reduce the risk so that they're at harvest at 16 months. Or aerate to increase the density, have more pounds per acre, which is a little bit more risky because you have the fish in the pond longer. Oxygen transfer tests. We do these at our facility as well as Auburn, other testing facilities. And it goes from 0 to 98, 100% saturation. It's done at 20 degrees C. The results are pounds of oxygen per horsepower per hour. Then what do you do with that information? Because in standard or real life, we don't start at 0 as far as oxygen. At least I hope we don't, because if we do, the fish are dead. So it's got to be somewhere 3 parts per million or greater. And the closer you get to saturation, the more difficult it is to add oxygen. And specifically, just as an example, if let's say the saturation is 10 parts per million, and we're at 3, it might take a fraction of a horsepower to get from 3 to 5. It might take 1 horsepower to get from 5 to 6. So the closer you get to saturation, the more difficult it is to add oxygen. So DO tips. This is Les Torrens, who I respect. He says, don't let it get below 3 parts per million at 6 a.m. This is stuff that he's done at Stoneville, and I think it's a pretty good rule in a Bible to look at. The diurnal fluctuations also can stress the fish. And so even if it doesn't get below 3, small fish can be significantly impacted negatively by wide swings. I'm talking 3 parts per million in the morning and 20 parts per million at 6 o'clock in the evening. So if there's a way that we can level this off and make it more uniform at 6 to 9 or something like that, I think that we'll find that there will be less stress on the fish. Feed conversions get better when the DO increases. Oxygen reduces the formation of unionized ammonia. So pure oxygen, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to say that the threshold in the industry that I understand is roughly half a pound per gallon of water or greater is going to need pure oxygen. Below that, you can go with surface agitation, splashers, diffused aeration, and the like. So in Stoneville, they have some split ponds with circulators at various RPMs. They can get up to 20,000 pounds of fish per acre of water. Best feed conversion ratios that they've seen is about 1.87 to 1, and these are the blues. These are the hybrids. 8 horsepower per acre. What that translates to is a little bit over, just under 9 cents per pound of production. The production cost of 75 cents, selling price of 115, an average farm size of 450. You can do the math to see if they don't have a lot of mortality that they're going to do okay with those kind of numbers. So this is just a photo of one of the split pond raceways, or split ponds. So 2 different styles of paddle wheels. The one on the left is the spiraling that was kind of devised by Dr. Claude Boyd. And specifically, the differences between the two, you got the one on the right that's made in Taiwan. It's a kerplunk, kerplunk, kerplunk type. The one on the left is spiraling so that if one blade is in the water, the other blade is out of the water so that they balance each other. They have a tendency to last longer because they don't have that much pressure on the gear reduction box. The disadvantage is they don't come in smaller horsepower and they're a little bit more expensive. Here's an example of a 30-acre lake pond in Chicago 2 years ago that was having a fish kill. 30-acre lake. They call us up, and within 16 hours we were down there. And what I'm trying to get at here is that there are only 5 3/4 horsepower aerators that were put in this pond, but the fish migrated to the current. They migrated to areas of higher oxygen. So even though it wasn't appropriate for that size pond, it was enough to get through the crunch. And so emergency aeration is important, and I realize that most bigger farmers are going to have backup PTO tractors or aerators that they can move from pond to pond. So 12 volt. If we think about 12 volt, it gives us an option to go to solar, and we'll see if the next video works. Everyone saw that? What I tried to show there is the one on the left was a half horsepower aerator, the one on the right was 3/4, and there wasn't a lot of difference. The thing is that thing will run 5 hours off of a deep cycle marine battery and then puke out. Or you hook it to your pickup truck and it'll last until you run out of gas. Or hook it to solar, it'll last a good long period of time. The thing is that there's a significant greater investment for the panel in the battery, and that at times if you don't store that energy, it's not going to work at night. And so sometimes you get a false sense of security that I've got a solar thing that's going to work all the time, but it's not going to work on the lazy, hazy days of August or at nighttime. How many times we hear, I want alternative energy, I want to get off the grid. And the thing is that once you talk to them about a price tag, typically, I'll get the slide here that shows it in a minute. So I don't want to, I'll jump ahead to that in a minute or two. So CO2 removal is a way, you can get at CO2 removal by surface aeration. Here's a different way, this is not upside down. This is the way that this thing functions. So there's a motor sitting on top. It's a splasher. It's borrowed from the wastewater treatment industry. Basically, this is an area that typically might have a lot of fines, or a lot of sediment that might settle down onto the shaft seal if the unit is turned off. And so there are some fish farms that use this type of technology that turn it on, turn it off. They're sand in the water column. It'll settle on the shaft seal, and if it does that continuously, over time, it might wear that seal prematurely. You know, oyster clam circulation upweller, interesting application here, and this is hard to see, but in the middle chamber there is a circulator. And so what they're doing there is just moving water through there's actually 8 of these cages in there, relatively small. It reduces predation. It circulates more food past them. It works as a clarifier as well, and it shaved a year off the production cycle. Cost per unit gain was positive. Now they're not using this for the big guys, they're using it for the small guys. Oh, so you gave it to Forrest, so I'm gonna zap him if I get past 5 minutes.
No, I'm the one standing up.
Okay. Net pen aquaculture, just different ways. The one on the left is a surface aerator, the one on the right is diffused air, so these are suspended basically into these net pens, and the idea here is just circulation of water, moving water from the bottom to the surface and basically pushing the good water out and bringing good water in. Good water, I mean just oxygenated water, if you will. Regenerative blower. Andy, you might recognize this. This was taken in '88 on your farm in Bluntstown. I think it was that in a farm field day. So high volume, low pressure. You know, different ways of doing it. There's air stones. This is a hybrid striped bass farm in North Florida. They just suspend air stones down into the water column. Here's another way of doing it. The thing about blowers is that with these lines, you know, you've got a main feeder on the right here, and all these lines going this way. If these air stones aren't suspended at the same depth, the air will try to follow the path of least resistance, and it'll go out the one that has least amount of friction on it. So they're all uniform in depth. They have a valve controlling them at the shore so that you get equal air distribution throughout all of them. Different methods of diffused air, more diffused air. You know, if we get into deeper ponds, the blowers don't work as well because we need pressure. And so the old style is these rotary vane carbon compressors. They're noisier, they have a little bit more maintenance involved with them, they're limited in pressure, they require more power, but they have better volume. Then its counterpart, which is the rocking pistons. Rocking piston compressors are quieter, they're better in pressure, they can go to 40 psi, so you can run them forever. Not as much maintenance, they're not quite the same volume, but they draw less amperage. So just think about this, a diffuser, whether it's this one or somebody else's, independent third-party tested to produce this kind of flow rate at 15 foot of depth. There's no pump in the world that can pump that kind of water. And so in deeper ponds that aren't intensely stocked, this might be a choice. Winter kill prevention. I know this doesn't apply to half the people in the room here, but all that you need in your pond is 1 to 2% of the surface area to be kept open. Diffuser maintenance, you have to keep them clean periodically. I want to talk about this for 15 seconds. So last year, you know, everyone understands epilinium, metalinium, and hypolinium. Metalinium was an area that has got enough oxygen in it so fish can live. When you get to the hypolinium, there wasn't anything there. So 2 times last summer, aeration systems were installed around the country, and we made it uniform top to bottom. And so these cool water fish lost their oxygen source. It was in the metalinium, so they didn't have anything, and it was basically lack of oxygen because we spun it around, and more importantly, lack of cold water. Venturi type causes directional flow. This is a shrimp production facility in Florida using Venturi to basically move water in these panel tanks. I don't think this is going to work, but I'm going to give it a shot here. So what I'm trying to do here is show that we release some dye. Oh, it is going to work. So this is a 1750 RPM circulator. This is an acre pond that is average depth of 6 feet. In 15 minutes, that whole pond was circulated top to bottom. And this was done with a drone. I think it had a stabilizer or something because it was sitting up there. And so new technology is a drone as well. Solar aeration, you know, some negative things are they can fall apart like the one on the left, the one on the right. It's $6,000 and it's only one diffuser, and so the conversation stops right there. This pico cell is new technology where that thing in the middle, what it does is allow these motors to slow start so that you don't need as much panel. You know, most of these motors will start with about 2.5 seconds of 3 times the energy requirement, where it slow starts it so that we can reduce solar And it's being used in developing countries right now with pumps all over the place. And we're thinking about taking it into aeration as well. Windmills, they're good if you don't have anything, but they need to have wind. If they don't have wind, they're not going to work. Now, think about diffused aeration for a second. There's a little compressor in there. We can run tubing for a mile if we had to, you know, so that's not limited by power unless the power is 15 miles away. You just put a bigger diameter pipe, you run it a distance, and then you put your diffusers out into the pond. So what 3 different aeration studies done at University of Florida, and what I like is here the Kasco aerator outshined them all, but the thing that doesn't show up in this slide is that we chopped them all up because we didn't have a screen on our intake, and so we had maybe 6 remaining fish. So, moral of the story is put a screen on your aerator if you got real small fish. You know, different types of aerators, bush hog aerator, outboard aerator. This guy used his tire to float our aerator. Google Earth is new technology. Here, you know, he was wondering why this thing wasn't functioning. This happened yesterday in our facility in Wisconsin. They unpacked a box and a return, and lo and behold, there was a black widow in there. And the guy was wondering why this thing wasn't working. Having fun, take a close look at the guys on the left. Just a few parting photos. Photo on the right is also related to the previous slide. Rock star in our midst, but he's not here. I was going to give him a good send-off. He's going to do jazz in New Orleans eventually. I challenge each of you to read this book by George Lockwood. You know, real quickly, a vast and incoherent array of statutes and regulations at all levels of government, local, regional, state, and federal, a lack of investment capital, and negative public image are the 3 things that are restricting growth within the United States. Tell everyone that Kasco rocks, or you'll have to deal with my enforcer, Davy Crockett Fornchell here. And lastly, I don't any talk that I give without saying that Bill Sklzacek, the former owner of our company, would be proud of where we're at today. One last thing. Who can say which NFL team is America's team? And whoever does it will get this book. Packers. You do not get it. I heard it from right there. Alan gets a copy of the book. Whoever said it. Oh, so you come rub my wallet too. All right. Sorry, I know I went pretty fast there. But it was only 17 minutes. I started 2 minutes late.